Stress is a indicator of overwhelm.
Yep.
And overwhelm comes when you overcommit.
Things like that end up coming from and being the byproduct of emotional disconnection. So when we look at stress, what are the things that for you, the listener, are getting you really stressed out? Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals from all over the world, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast, where we talk about all things relationships. Today, episode number 106, how is stress affecting your relationship? Emilia and I, prior to this episode, we had this conversation about should it be affecting or should it be effecting? We're not going to get into it.
We had a duel.
We dueled with lightsabers, which we got for Christmas from my mother. That actually is true. We can't talk about that right now. Yeah, two truths, one lie. You figure it out. Before we jump into this episode, we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions. As a matter of fact, the couple that produces this show that is on the Next Level Podcast Solutions team was at the event that we're going to talk about right now. So they're going to get the event recap, which is this episode, and they were also there.
Yeah.
So very cool. All right. So before we jump into this episode, my love, as always, what is your intention? Ladies first.
My intention per this episode is to actually help our listeners not only reduce stress in their relationships, because that's something that, as we'll get into in this episode, was overwhelming in terms of what our community is experiencing. But in addition to that, I also want to help through this episode, our listeners emotionally connect.
Okay, so the event title was?
How to emotionally connect to your partner.
All right, so we opened the event and we had two definitions. We don't have them in front of us right now. It would probably be optimal for us to give a little bit of that definition. By any chance, sweetheart, do you remember them?
Yeah, so essentially we shared the contrast of what emotional connection is, which is a feeling and a sense of two people coming together that have a connection point that's revolving around empathy, understanding, and shared experiences.
Nice. Well done. Well done.
And then the contrast of that, what we showed was the difference between that and emotional disconnection, which you can imagine is literally the opposite side of that coin, where two people feel a deep sense of disconnection through apathy, being ignored. So the opposite of understanding is being ignored and being at distance. And then the third one is a deep disinterest to not want to co-create memories together.
Great memory, love.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. Wow. When I brought up the definitions, I was like, wow, we should really share those here for those of you who weren't able to make it to the event.
It's my visual memory.
And well done.
Thank
it's
you.
So good. Okay. So at the event, we used 50 First Dates, the movie, as our sort of example of what it can be like to create emotional connection. But at the very beginning, after we defined emotional connection and emotional disconnection, which Emilia just so eloquently also reiterated, we pulled up the 5 emotional disconnectors. And Emilia always creates the content, and then I kind of curate it and put it into the right syntax. We've got our own system going. And I remember when I was first looking at the slides for the very first time, when I got to this slide, I was like, whoa, this is the value. This is good. And so the emotional disconnectors, we've got them up here on the big screen. Number 1 is lack of empathy. Number 2 is stress and conflict. Number 3 is trust issues. Number 4 is poor communication. And number 5 is digital distractions. I thought number 5 was going to be the most.
Really? Yeah. I was just going to say, I actually thought the poor communication was going to be the heavy hitter, because whenever we get into talking with couples or whenever we kind of like get into what do you think is the biggest thing for communications, or for a successful relationship, the first word that comes out of, and it just falls out of every couple's mouth, is communication.
Yeah.
But the deeper distinctions underneath that is what we got into in this event, and I think really helped couples feel seen.
So these are the 5, and what we did is we asked everyone to share what their number 1 is.
Yeah.
So what's the number 1 that you struggle with in your relationship?
Yeah.
And for the singles in the room, just the ones that they've struggled with in the past. And so Emilia and I looked it up when we pulled up the chat. We have our what she refers to as sentiment data. And essentially what we did is we did a search function to see how many people answered with each one of these. And so empathy was 2. Lack of empathy was 2 people.
Yeah.
Stress was 7.
Stress was 7.
Stress was the highest.
Yeah.
And then trust didn't come up at all, which was surprising, to be honest. I thought that was going to come up more.
Neither did the digital distraction.
It didn't come up that much.
That didn't come up that much.
And then poor communication. So the 2 biggest ones were lack of empathy, or no, I'm sorry, the 2 that weren't the biggest that I thought were going to be bigger are digital distraction and trust issues.
Trust issues.
The second and third biggest were lack of empathy and poor communication. And the biggest was stress.
Yep.
We typed in the word stress and it came up 7 times. 7 people out of 18 people were there.
Yeah.
And so 7 out of 18, that's the big one. And we wanted to do an episode on that. So how is stress affecting your relationship? And really, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that came up through that event, which is why I think all of these were really powerful to actually just even ask the audience around, is because when we think about emotional connection, right? When we think about wanting to connect in our emotions with our relationship or to our partners, we don't necessarily think about the opposite of like what's preventing that from happening. And so this event really brought not only the community, but hopefully now our listeners through the thought process of, okay, well, what is the biggest barrier to us as a couple actually connecting? Because then what spirals out of that is like us not feeling like a team together. You know, then that comes in all the like little, what we call stingers, where you're throwing out, you know, joke, what seems funny, but is actually negatively impacting the relationship. Like, for example, you look so great in that shirt, when in reality, you might not mean it. Things like that end up coming from and being the byproduct of emotional disconnection. So when we look at stress, what are the things that for you, the listener, are getting you really stressed out? And that's really essentially where I think we should take this episode. One of them that I want to talk about is that our community tends to overcommit. The people-pleasing tendency is what I see in relationships is because people do not know how to set boundaries and struggle to commit within the realm of what they are actually capable of, because they don't want to let someone down that they love, end up piling a ton of things on their plate. And then that leads to so much stress, overwhelm, and burnout. So that's something that our community has definitely shared with us that they struggle with. So I would say step number 1 to recognize how stress is affecting your relationship, it is the fact that you guys are emotionally disconnected because oftentimes you're not saying no enough.
The place that I would take this episode is number 1, 0 to 10, how stressed are you? We're 35 days away from Next Level Live, and I've learned over the years that my stress levels increase exponentially as the big day comes. There's just a lot that goes. If you've ever done event planning, event prep, it's a whole thing. It's far more beneath the surface than it looks like on the actual day of. And I'm in what I refer to as the pressure cooker. We have an Instapot that we use, and what it does is it cooks food with a pressure cooker. I think Instapot's fairly famous, so I think a lot of people probably have Instapots. But that's the pressure cooker. And so when you have goals, when you have deadlines, when you have projects at work, when you have things that are putting you in the pressure cooker, number 1, 0 to 10, how stressed are you right now? So let's lead by example of 0 to 10, how stressed.
We actually came up with a thing called the pressure pie last night in reflection after this event. Alan and I were both talking about like, where are we in our stress and what is making up the pie? If you could imagine the pie of your stress, what's the biggest slice essentially? And so 0 to 10, where I am at this very moment, I would say I'm at like probably a 6 out of 10 in terms of stress, but I know as the day goes on, the stress is going to go up. And I know that because we have a family dinner tonight. And then I have, a lot of things, coaching calls starting Saturday morning, first thing, 10 o'clock. And then I have recording. So there's so many things that I have to do and make sure that I am at my best for.
Hi, I'm Derek, and I just wanted to talk about relationship talks with Alan and Emilia. If you're looking to get some help on working with your relationships, you should definitely give them a shot. They can help you identify certain patterns on things that maybe you didn't realize that you've done or that have happened. And if you want to be able to just start really kind of narrowing down the things that you can work on now that'll help you be more efficient for future relationships or even the one that you're in, they're definitely the ones to go see, as clearly they lead an example of what a great relationship should look like. And just in general, they're both incredibly intelligent and smart with just being able to pick out the things that maybe either you missed or that you knew but didn't really quite click yet. So you should definitely give them a shot, because they're very, very helpful and efficient at what they do.
Stress is a indicator of overwhelm.
Yep.
And overwhelm comes when you overcommit. And so we're already kind of getting to the root of this.
Yeah.
So you have a 6 out of 10. I would say I actually feel pretty good today. I would say probably 7 out of 10. Not terrible. Now, in terms of the pressure pie, what is the source of that? And you just kind of broke that down. So what we did last night is I said 60% of my stress is the event, and 40% is trying to hit our revenue goal at Next Level University.
Yep.
So for you, what would be your percentages? And again, listeners, we want you thinking about you, not us.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually just think about like the today in terms of the percentages, just because I did give some of those examples. So I would say the percentage right now, the 60% for me and my stress levels today are strictly to make sure that I'm adding as much value as humanly possible to my beautiful clients at Evolve. And then also our relationship talks coaching clients later tonight, because that work is so meaningful and really does help so many people in such intimate areas of their lives. So I take my work extremely seriously in that. So that's 60%. I would say the other 40% is family and wanting to make sure that I remain in my true self as we go into our family dynamics this weekend.
And so,
family leadership.
Sorry to interrupt you, love.
It's okay.
One of the things that you and I have found in our relationship, but also with our family as well, is sometimes we call them school nights playfully, but essentially what it is we grind all day, serve, pour, and then we are not really emotionally available to connect with our families when we do see them. And so we've got a dinner tonight with your family, and then we have a dinner tomorrow night with my mother. And so they're kind of getting us at the tail end of our weeks and our days. Yeah. And so again, to bring this back to the listener, 0 to 10, how stressed are you? And if it's 10, you've got to take some actions to work on that. Otherwise, you will unintentionally emotionally disconnect from your partner or unintentionally hurt your partner. And then number 2, what are the sources of those stressors? And then number 3 is, what are you going to do about it? So that's the steps. Number 1 is rate it from 0 to 10. How stressed are you? Number 2 is, what are the sources of it? And then number 3 is, what are you actually going to do about it?
And what I think you and I just modeled really beautifully is, and I didn't realize we were doing this, but you actually are talking about macro stress.
Yeah.
So a longer time distance, and that's your pressure pie, essentially.
Yeah.
What I modeled was essentially the day-to-day stress, which is the micro stress.
Yep.
And
by the way, this is kind of like microeconomics and macroeconomics. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to help?
How nerdy you are.
Yeah.
So cute. So
I love micro and macroeconomics.
I do
Huge
too.
Fan.
I'm such a fan. I know our listeners from a time perspective might be struggling just to focus on the day-to-day. So take that day-to-day slice of your pressure pie and ask the question that Alan just asked, 0 to 10, how stressed are you today? And I know there's so many different tools, so many different apps that help you check in on the day-to-day, because once you do have a good gauge on your day-to-day, then you can really start to zoom out to the bigger lens of your life and kind of say, what are those bigger pressures? And that's where you might be thinking about, well, there's this huge loan that I'm trying to pay off, or we're trying to start a family, or we're trying to
buy a house.
You
and I are trying to get a house next year. So
and those are macro stressors.
I want to share this as well. So Emilia and I were on a walk yesterday morning, and I did what we're referring to as tea kettling, where I just kind of express all of my stresses. And I feel a million times better after that, because now we took some corrective action, and I really asked Emilia to support me up until the event in some ways that it's almost like, so now she's taking Tucker, Tilly, and Tao out or to the bathroom
Yeah.
at 3:00. There's a bunch of little things that I don't want to get into that she's supporting me. You're also going to be cooking and doing a lot of that, what we refer to as kitchen man and kitchen woman.
Kitchen woman.
Yeah, and you're going to be kitchen woman. And I'm typically kitchen man, so I don't want that to sound off. But at the end of the day, I feel a million times better today just because now I'm not alone in the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And my question for our listeners is, when you bring up your stresses to your partner, this is something you and I talked about last night, do you want a support or like a shoulder or a solver? Do you want a supporter or a solver? A supporter or a shoulder is like a shoulder to cry on, a shoulder to lean on.
Where
solver,
you just express
yes,
without any ask from the other person who's hearing you express, this partner in this example, to do literally anything about it. There's
yes,
no role. There's no let me take on the responsibility of fixing your problems. Nothing. It's literally just let me express and hold space.
So what Emilia and I are going to start doing is when one of us is expressing our stresses, which you do need, even just expressing helps.
I would say that's action step number 1 to your third question that you said.
And I think of the
listeners.
Instapot, when you relieve the pressure, there's a little valve in the back of the Instapot that you
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my
Don't put
Instapot
your hand
impression.
over that.
Yes.
It's way too hot.
And if you
will
put
burn
it
you.
under the cabinet,
it could cause a fire.
Cause a fire. Although, yeah. Anyways, my fire protection tells me that probably wouldn't happen, but it doesn't matter.
With all the steam.
With all the steam.
Mr. Macro Man.
You know it. Mr. Macro Man. So, just expressing is going to help. Number 2 is, and you and I are going to start implementing this, do you need a shoulder or do you need a solver? Because sometimes I'll actually ask Emilia and I'll say, what would you do?
Yeah.
And other times it's like, sweetheart, I really just need to talk about this. And so that's really what I would end with is number 1, where are you at 0 to 10 in terms of your stressors, micro, macro. Number 2, what is the pie? What is the percentage? Is it mostly because you have an event coming up? Is it mostly work? Is it mostly your fitness goals? Is it mostly the household? What is the source of it? And then number 3, what are you going to do differently? Even if that means just expressing it so that you're not alone in it. And that is literally all I have.
Yeah. For the partner that is listening to the expression or when that happens, I want to encourage the question to be asked so that you know what role to shift into or what your partner is looking for, which is, do you need a solver or do you need a shoulder right now before your partner starts expressing? That's going to be super critical before you start to emotionally dump or vent and whatnot. And I think that given what I have seen in our relationship and our community, I think that it's super important to make sure that you ask that question so that you know how to kind of be there for your partner, especially when they are expressing how stress is affecting the relationship.
Very well done, love. This is good. This is really good. Okay. For our listeners who did come to the event, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We have another one coming up in a month. We do them every month. And also we have, as you know, 30-minute free relationship talks coaching. The relationship talks coaching, I like to describe it as, it's not just couples counseling. It is that. It's going to help you connect with your partner on a deeper level, but it's also going to help you sort of tease out some of the bigger cycles and issues that are happening so that you can build towards your goals and dreams. It's more aspirational. It's more build together as a team, stay on the same page, and design a life that you both love together. That is literally what Relationship Talks coaching is all about.
Yeah. And let's say, for example, you hear about this event and you're like, ooh, I want to see what's going on there. You can join in our next event. It's going to be March 21st, and we're going to be getting into the 4 relationship killers. And to register, the link will be in the show notes. We hope to see you there. You don't have to have your camera or mic on. You can literally just listen in. We had some newbies join us in our last event, which was awesome. We've had people reaching out to us for certain work activity sheets. It's been amazing to see this Relationship Talks event just grow and impact so many beautiful souls around the world. So thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you at the next one.
And thank you for participating as much as you did, because if it wasn't for your participation, we wouldn't have been able to have this data for this episode of which one was causing you all the most challenges in terms of emotional connection. It was stress.
Yeah,
stress was 7 out of 18 people. So
yeah,
that's wild. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As always, thank you for listening. This is This is the Conscious Couples Podcast, and it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia and Alan is a Lazaros 88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.